Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint myself up some Savage Orruks. Now, in order to do this, because they are bore riders, I've had to spend a little bit of time inserting plastic rod. No other way to put that, unfortunately. But it took a while. Not an enjoyable process, but you know what, it's done. Okay. So, I'm going to start off with these guys. I'm not going to use the Orc contrast that I did with the Cruel Boys. I'm actually going to start off with the Warg flesh, and that's because with them being so muscular, I want just to be able to create far deeper tones of muscle detail. So I'm starting out with a kind of what will be, dipped into my wet palette, and then I'm going to start obviously getting this all painted up. So the idea is quite simple, really. Start with a lighter shade so that I've got something I can add more layers of wash into. More contrasting colours. Just so I can create a better set of tone, basically. So, it's not uncommon, and I've seen it done by some expert painters, which I don't really consider myself on their level, but I do believe that we can emulate some of their skills in little ways. So what I'm actually doing here with a lot of these models is I'm creating a kind of a very simple, when I say really simple, I mean like really, really simple form of underpainting. Now, I'm not going to try and pretend that I understand it all fully, but it's all about creating a solid base. Now, if you want to actually find someone who's absolutely amazing at explaining all of this, please look up Tabletop Miniature Showcase. In fact, I'll put a link to his channel, and he's absolutely sound. Sure, that's how his handle is anyway on it. And he explains about how far too many YouTube channels try and convince you that you need to use like this technique, and actually you just need to get the basics right. So I'm gonna give a fair link to him, because he reminded me of something recently that far too often I'm trying to overdo it, and I don't need to. And that actually I need to take a step back and re-practice some of the core skills that I lost because I stopped painting for so long. And what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to create a solid base. That solid base is going to allow me to, properly apply my shades. I feel like my camera's not focusing at all today on the Orc. Oh, that was over focused. A bit more focused than on it. So I wonder if it's because I've got so many boys in the background. It's kind of picking them up as the focus. Yeah, I definitely need to invest in a better camera than this. Sometimes I'm just constantly fighting focus when I just want to be painting. force focused a bit better. I don't know what's wrong with my focus today. I'm going to reposition my camera. Okay, hopefully I've got a bit of sharper focus and I'm closer on the model now. Definitely finding these orcs completely interesting with their dress sense, as in they don't seem to have much of one. Just purely because this thing literally just wraps around. It's not even fully covering him. It's lucky that Orruks, I don't think are technically, technically have a gender. Oh, right, I'm getting to some of the more difficult points now on this guy, where things like his lips. Now, part of that problem is because he's got a tooth embedded right in his lip. Hopefully you can see now why I've put this guy on a little spike. The very rear of his body is, and of his undercarriage is not going to be seen. So it's perfectly okay if I glue something there. So unlikely anyone's going to see that part, and I'm just going to be able to maybe just, if it is visible, I can probably just drop a little bit of contrast in there to create a shadow when I finally pop him on. Right. I always find myself not rushing when I record what I'm doing. Like, even if I wasn't putting things on YouTube like I am now, I think honestly I would just record myself doing everything. It just slows me down. And I'm finding that that's helping me improve my painting. Okay. Now, I'm going to let that dry for a little bit. And while that is drying, I'm going to prep the hand on the shield, so you can see that there. I spent roughly 2 hours, maybe more than 2 hours today, just painting one solid colour across all of my Orruks. And we are talking fully brown, Mournfang brown, across every single little bit of my forces. By the end of it, I was just thinking to myself, you are insane. What were you thinking? But I've made such progress on this army just in a single day by being obsessed with just finishing one colour across the board. No. Oops. Snapped off my little thing there. I'm going to have to reattach that. You can see, if you can put a little bit of plastic on a place that isn't going to be seen, it'll stop your there's no other way to put it, the sweat and the dirt that builds up on your fingers, right down to the other paints from polluting your model. Right, I'm going to have to reattach that thing, aren't I? So it's got something to hold on to. Right. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to just sort of stop this camera for a minute while I just basically carry on painting all the other Savage Orruks in one solid layer of green. And then by then, hopefully this will have dried up and I can move on to the next part. Okay, so next phase is to get the orc flesh contrast on here. Now, you might think, well, okay, I've completely covered the whole thing in it now, so what was the point of that first lighter layer? It does make a difference. Obviously, this contrast here was put over a grey, and as a result, the skin on this guy is, more washed out, more pallid looking, and less definement. So obviously that's the look that I'm going for. Same first try. I think this might be a bit easier, and then I've gone over with a very light contrast at the end of that, which we will build up to, but your base colour does make a massive difference. It really does. So get my contrast again. I'm watering this. I'm literally just putting it on the wet palette and then getting it nice and wet, and you can see it's just kind of flowing. You know what, that is a very well sculpted butt. You can see how fast this part is as well because of it. So the idea of contrasts is they're really good for basically whatever base colour you've chosen. Kind of great at being a shade if you water them down. They can be a layer. I'm sure if I added enough thickness to it, I could use it to dry brush as well if I probably wanted to, but that's not what I'm going for today. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get this lovely darkness tone into his muscles. You can see how well defined those muscles are as a result of this process. Again, I didn't really want that with the Cruel Boys. I didn't want their muscle tone to dominate anywhere. Whereas these guys, I want it to feel powerful. I want that kind of, heavy shadows between different places. I'm going to have to work in, among other things. Oh, I'm trying to get this in here. Just that was a difficult bit to do. Yeah. Just that feeling of like mass almost. Like when you see a bodybuilder and they've got all the kind of tanning on them. And of course, obviously they've tried to get that dark colour right into their recesses of the muscles to add tone. And that's the feeling that I'm trying to get from this guy. It's that. I'm not saying this guy's gone into a tanning booth and got a good spray on him. He's, he's been out and about getting his tan natural way. By being the biggest hardest orc. Right. Okay, so now I've got that deep shading going on. Okay, it's going to take a while for that to dry because obviously that's a very dark and watery layer that I've just done there. I'll come back to that in a little bit. Of course, in the meantime, yeah, there we go. Making sure that I'm trying to do a good job on not just the body itself, but I think when I was younger, it was probably one of my worst habits to try and spend ages painting like the main body of the model. Then I would just rush things like hands. And sometimes you gotta put the effort into every single part of the model. I mean, I know someone who absolutely obsesses with making their backpacks perfect. I see them on different forums all the time, and kudos to them because they're right. The back of the model is the thing that you see. The enemy sees the front, you see the back. Anyway, I'm going to let him dry for a little bit. Then I'm going to start adding a kind of lighter colour to the front of him. What colour that'll be, I'm torn between Lauren Forest Strachan Green or I think it's Warg Flesh, a very vibrant green colour. So I'm going to have to decide on that in a little bit. Okay, so next little process that I'm going to go through is dry brushing. So basically, you can see here I've now gone and dry brushed downwards onto this model, and it's starting to kind of change the way he looks. So obviously at the moment he suddenly looks a lot lighter. In order to do that, what I've done is I've put some of this Warboss green onto a flat brush like this one, dried it off, really kind of dried it off, and then what we do is we just kind of that doesn't help. I'll have to glue that back on later. basically and start kind of brushing downwards against the model. Now I tend to dry brush downwards to create like the kind of sunspot effect more than anything. You should be able to see here it's slowly taking on a lightness to it now. I always tend to find that flat, rather stiff bristled brushes are best for dry brushing for little miniatures. But if you're doing on a bigger, say, monstrous creature, you tend to be wanting sort of makeup style brushes. The other ones with the big fanned approach. But, you know, each brush has its own qualities. Okay, you can see here that it's very slowly building up the appearance that I want. And it's starting to really define the muscle tone fully now. It's starting to stick out a lot more. Too much that. Get that dried off. Okay, so that's a nice colour going on here, and hopefully it's coming across on the camera, which is obviously difficult to do sometimes because obviously in order to paint I need a lot of light on it. Right, let's have a side-by-side comparison of those two. Make sure that I'm happy with the colour that I've developed for them. So, yeah, he's starting to gain that kind of depth and tonal, you know, that quality that I really want. I'm just going to re-glue that back on because that's not quite, obviously it's going to make it hard to paint. It's going to start wrecking the paint eventually. Let me just quickly do this hand here. Okay, and then shield. Ooh, I forgot which shield. There we go, that shield will do. Don't know if that was the one I picked out before, but it will do. Now I'm trying to be careful with this shield because with it being a shield, not everything's going to be quite in the light. Okay. Right, so that is another layer on now. Now, this is where sometimes you find yourself sort of layer. The next thing, obviously, is for me to do an ink, basically washing into the recesses once more to further darken those shadows. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just kind of finish off by, first of all, adding some shade, and then obviously then the decision about whether or not I just want to do one final highlight anywhere. So let me just show you here. It's probably hard to perceive on the camera, but obviously I've added some darkness into the recesses of this guy, particularly where we've got some deepness to the model. So just trying to basically, as I did with the previous shade, using the contrast, I'm heading for shadow, but I'm not going to go kind of everywhere like I did the contrast. I'm just going to directly push it into the muscles and into shaded areas. So I'm being very precise about where I want to put this. It's not everywhere like it was with the contrast. Basically trying to hit anywhere that will look nice if there's a bit of shade to it. Simple. Trying to really hit areas like under the chin for depth. Into that rib cage. Under the arms again on this side. Hopefully you can see the aim is to just create the places and then just trying to push the last little bit. Basically it's just about giving them that final beautiful tone and definition. I was wondering whether or not he'll probably need like maybe one lighter colour dry brushed somewhere, but honestly I'm looking at him and I think I'm happy with the appearance that this skin has got. What I've got, hopefully you can see, is some really beautiful tone going on. You know, some light, some dark, all in the right natural places that I would want them to be. So, you know, maybe in the future if I feel brave, I'll add another layer. But if you look at him, I think, you know, with him being dried and everything for a little while, he's got the darkness that I wanted for in this. But it's a different type of darkness compared to the Cool Boys. So if I try and focus on this Cool Boy, you can see his skin is dark, but it's not the same kind of darkness as this guy. Obviously, hopefully you can see that this one looks more refined, more detailed. Picking out those lovely muscles that it has. Okay, well, you know, that is my second kind of Orruk skin. This is more layers, more shading going on, but hopefully you'll agree that it's created a richer, more detailed look to it that hopefully, you know, you can emulate even if you're not a pro. So just to recap, because obviously did quite a few processes. Started off with a wag flash base. I went into a contrast to get a bit of darkness, and then highlighted in Borbras green, and then shaded in the camo shade, and I think that works, and I think that's the colour that I wanted to get, so I'm happy with that. Anyway, I'd really appreciate your thoughts. I'll just try and take a bit of the, you know, the heavy light off it so you can get a good view. There we go. Right, okay then. So I'd love to know your thoughts. That's the second type of orc kind of colour that I've done. And I'd love your thoughts. And the next green that I'm going to do is a grot.